This is Focus on Africa from BBC World News. I'm Sophie Ikenye. Our top stories. As long as I'm quiet, I'm safe. Two reports highlight arrests and disappearances in Tanzania, part of a damning verdict on freedom of expression.
What we've seen in the last about 3 years is a ratcheting up of the repression of the media using a variety of tools.
A journey to recovery. Cyclone Idai left a trail of destruction in Mozambique earlier this year. So how are people faring now? We have a special report. Also in the program, the town that time forgot. We visit the 900-year-old village perched on top of a mountain in Ethiopia.
This is our ancestors' village. That is why we cherish it. And it's difficult for us to go to other places.
And in sport, the new president of the Ghana Football Association vows to fight corruption. Thanks for joining us on Focus on Africa from BBC World News. As long as I'm quiet, I am safe. That's the title of a damning report by Human Rights Watch on threats to independent media and civil society in Tanzania. Now, the report, which was released alongside another by Amnesty International, says new laws passed since President John Magufuli came into power in 2015 have repressed independent reporting and restricted the work of media, non-governmental organizations and political opposition groups. Now, since 2015, dozens of journalists have been arrested and some have gone missing. Over 10 newspapers and radio stations have received punitive fines for their coverage. Now, since 2016, Tanzania has fallen 47 places on the Press Freedom Index to 118th out of 180 countries. That's more than any country has fallen in the same period. Well, the BBC's Emmanuel Igunza has more on that.
Nitalinda uhuru wa wanahabari. Kwa sababu wanahabari.
President John Magufuli on the campaign trail before his eventual election in 2015. He assured journalists of freedom to do their job once he got into office.
Be careful and watch it.
And this is just 2 years into his presidency in 2017. He was talking tough about media freedom.
Not to that extent.
Since coming into power in November 2015, President Magufuli's government has come under sharp criticism for what rights groups say is stifling of the media space. The latest case is of this man, local journalist Eric Kabendera, who was arrested last July initially due to questions about his citizenship. But he now faces much serious accusations of money laundering and tax evasion. Critics of the state say this is just an example of targeting of journalists that has sent chills across the industry.
What we've seen in the last about 3 years is a ratcheting up of the repression of the media using a variety of tools, from restrictive legislation to problematic regulations to the arrest of journalists, in some cases arrested for 1 day, released, arrested for 2 days, released.
This is Ann Pinoni, the wife of Tanzanian journalist Azori Gwanda, who is believed to have been arrested by security personnel in November of 2017. He's not been seen to date. Prior to his disappearance, he had been investigating a series of killings in his community. Early this year, Tanzania's foreign minister told BBC that the journalist was among several people who had disappeared and died. He, however, quickly changed his statements, saying they were taken out of context. Pinoni, however, says she's still waiting for answers from authorities.
I have faith that one day my husband will return to me. I've not lost hope, and I will keep waiting and praying that one day God will find a way for my Azori to come back.
President Magufuli came into power in November 2015 on a platform of tackling corruption and improving service delivery within government. But his tenure has also seen dozens of radio stations and newspapers shut down for accusations ranging from publishing fake news to sedition. Numerous journalists have also been arrested, intimidated or beaten up by people believed to be state security. And last year, Tanzania fell down the rank on the World Press Freedom Index, currently at number 118 out of 180 countries. It's the worst decline of any country on the index. The government has, however, dismissed accusations of stifling the media, insisting that new media laws enacted recently are only aimed at tackling fake news.
Let me remind you that there's a new law particularly for online bloggers and for those who are spreading fake news. If we take action against you, don't start complaining that the government is muzzling the press. If you read the clauses in the law, you will see clearly that they prohibit publication of fake news. You will have to follow the law because we have been very patient for a long time.
It is such tough talk from government officials that worries critics. Presidential elections are due next year, and with such a weakened opposition and fearful press, many worry that the future of Tanzania will only be bleak. Emmanuel Igunza, BBC News.
Well, joining me from Dar es Salaam, Tanzania is Maria Sarungi Sehai, a communication expert. Thanks for taking time to talk to us on Focus on Africa. You've had your own experience since these media laws were passed. What happened?
Yes, thank you very much for having me. The experience that I've had is that my company, Compass Communication, owns also an online TV called Kwanza TV, and it is online. Currently, it has been suspended by the authorities for 6 months for something that it has said was not following the regulations. And we've just appealed in the Fair Competition Tribunal, which the law allows us to do. And this has come, of course, as a very big surprise and shock to the entire industry, as we've been seeing some of the restrictions. However, the suspension itself has taken us by a lot of surprise. Of course, as I've said previously, we'll be appealing it.
All right. But what sort of subjects are these that, forced the law to take such a course?
Well, the reference was made to the online content regulation that your report has referred to, and it was more about not following journalistic ethics and standard, because we made a report about a public official, and we used the title, meaning doctor, and we also used the family name, but we did not mention the first name. And apparently the decision made by the Communication Regulatory Authority was that we did not follow journalistic standards because there is another famous person or a more famous person who goes by the same family name, and therefore we created confusion. That was the reason for the suspension.
So one of the issues that keeps coming up also is, the issue of self-regulation. Where then do you make your balance when it comes to what you write, what you blog on, for instance, or what you air?
I think that the biggest challenge is the interpretation and the wide field that exists in what can be taken as not following journalistic ethics and standard. As it is very evident, even in our case, is that this is open and subject to interpretation. And that means that there is a lot of authority that is being held by certain authorities or a group of people or a committee that can make decisions that can impact very seriously the business of any online or even normal media house. That is where I think that basically the most important thing that we need to see is to see some sort of proper legislation. Nobody has been against the legislation in any way, either of any kind of media houses. But what is very important is to have a more clear set of regulations, but also when it comes to redress. So when it comes to appeal, when it comes to redress, there is a necessity to see that these things are done at a speed and also with a certain fairness. Right now, there has been a lot of what is called the chilling factor. So it's not that all the media houses have fallen into similar situation, but some of the media houses that have gone through such an experience have seen a chilling effect. And that has meant that there's been a lot of self-censorship. All
right. Very interesting. Maria Sarungi, thank you for taking time to talk to us on Focus on Africa. Thank you. Now, tropical cyclone Idai left a trail of destruction behind earlier this year in Mozambique. The Category 4 cyclone, which also affected Zimbabwe and Malawi, killed more than 1,000 people and did $2 billion worth of damage. Despite substantial aid from aid packages, the country is still struggling to get back to its feet. Well, the BBC's Shinga Inyoka covered the devastation at the time, and 8 months on, she returns to Beira in central Mozambique to see the reconstruction efforts.
The water that brought death once again gives life. 7 months after a devastating cyclone, Beira's fishing trade is booming again. But it's a city that still bears the scars of Idai. And not everyone has recovered. Many of those living in the sprawling shanty towns remain vulnerable to the elements. Mozambique, with its long coastline, has always been prone to ferocious storms. And after Idai, residents, including some of the most vulnerable, are rebuilding their lives as best they can. But as you can see, they're using the same materials that couldn't withstand the cyclone. It's been a difficult road to recovery. $700 million worth of infrastructural damage. But there's a far greater human cost. Elsa Koller escaped Cyclone Idai with her identity documents and one blanket. Relocated here 6 months ago, she's building her home, but is haunted by what she went through.
It is up to God. I can say it will not hold, but God can help us, as He did the last time. Everybody here still lives in fear. Every time the wind blows, my children say, "Mom, the cyclone is coming back. Let's run away."
She lives in one of the many resettlement camps dotted around central Mozambique. Hundreds of families still live in plastic tents with the barest of facilities. Many lost their livelihoods. Experts warn severe storms in the mold of Idai will become more common with global warming, more rainfall, higher wind surges.
No doubt there's a huge responsibility to us from the countries with high carbon emissions. Their money to assist with shocks is not enough, so we cannot stand still. And one of the very simple things to do is to look at this ecosystem as our friend. The trees, the dunes. If we don't have the money to build great walls and defensive lines that will protect populations, like in the Netherlands, for example, at least we can order our spaces and stop this constant degradation. Let's do what we can do with the money we have.
Idai is at the back of their minds for now. With Mozambique already having endured 5 severe cyclones in the last 20 years, none of these children can predict what the future holds. Shinganyoka, BBC News, Central Mozambique.
Well, let's talk to Francisco Pereira. He's the Executive Director, Office for Reconstruction in Mozambique. He joins us from Maputo. Thanks for taking time to talk to us on Focus on Africa. We've seen there in that report that people, yes, are rebuilding, but they're using the same material that could not withstand the storm the last time. The country has been given a huge commitments, financial commitments by, the donors. What have you done with the money so far?
Hello. Okay. The problem that the money have been announced during the conference in Beira in May, June this year, but unfortunately the most part of money didn't arrive unless some advance money done by World Bank, $65 million. And with that money, we start to repair the roads, the water supply, and to distribute some agricultural inputs like seeds and other tools.
So you're using the money that you got from the World Bank that you replaced it. You're an engineer. What would be, say, the best way to rebuild a country such that there's less impact of this kind in future?
Okay, all the sectors, economic and social, have been affected. So sometimes it's difficult to define priorities. But we are giving some attention for housing. The most part of the housing are precarious houses, but the poor people. And some of them, about 20,000, have been replaced in the new new areas, but also still with tents. And we hope to start the program of launch soon in November, in order to also to protect the people from the next rain season.
All right, so
but,
Mr. Pereira, very, very quickly, Mozambicans are quite resilient. They are a resilient people. I wonder how they are dealing with this right now, psychologically, emotionally. How has it been?
Yes, it is a tragedy, because I have to say that only in housing we lost about 250,000 houses on the center and 50,000 on the north. So it's a huge problem to solve, and physical and the social problem and the psychological problem. So we are trying to use some NGOs, local and foreign NGOs, to help us on the contact with the communities, and to try at the same time that we are doing the physical repair, they can help the communities with some social support, some psychological support.
All right. All right, Francisco Pereira, thank you very much indeed for bringing us up to speed with the situation there in Mozambique. Thank you. Well, let's now take a quick look at other stories making headlines across Africa and the rest of the world. And staying with Mozambique, the opposition party Renamo has called for a rerun of the general election, alleging intimidation, violence and vote rigging, claims the ruling party denies. President Filipe Nyusi secured another 5-year term after a landslide victory in the general election with a win of 73% of the vote. Independent observers have also described the vote as flawed. The South African government has said people must restrict water usage or face cuts in services because of severe shortages. 3 out of the country's 9 provinces are running dry and spring rains are late. Utility companies in some areas say that water should only be used for drinking, bathing and cooking. This is Focus on Africa from BBC World News. Still to come. On top of the world, we find out what it's like living in a 900-year-old village far away in the mountains of Ethiopia. I'm Sophie Ikenye and you're watching Focus on Africa from BBC World News. The top stories on this program. 2 reports are released by rights groups which give a damning verdict on freedom of expression in the media and civil society in Tanzania. 8 months after Cyclone Idai left a trail of devastation in central Mozambique, the area is still struggling to get life back to normal. You're watching BBC Focus on Africa. Let's find out what's happening in the world of sport. Pierre-Antoine.
Many thanks, Sophie. And let's start in Ghana, where newly elected president of the Football Association, Kurt Okraku, says he's ready to jump straight into his new job. And first on the agenda, fight corruption within the game. The Ghana FA was dissolved last year following allegations of corruption featured in a BBC investigative documentary. Okraku spoke to the BBC's Thomas Nardi.
We have campaigned basically on the basic and core principles of good governance, corporate governance. We have preached transparency. We have preached accountability. We have said that we want to establish an internal audit system. We have said that we want to establish a compliance unit that ensures that we all fall in line when people are going wayward. We have said that it's important we develop an institution that is strong ethically.
We now move to Nigeria, where head coach Gernot Rohr is not a happy man. The 60-year-old German has accused the Confederation of African Football of not showing enough respect to the Super Eagles with the rescheduling of the 2021 African Cup of Nations qualifier against Benin, scheduled for November 13. Why? Because this is only 2 days after the international window opens, leaving very little time for preparation. Rohr said it's not fair and that the date needs to be changed. He says he's spoken to CAF's Anthony Baffoe and the Benin coach Michel Dussuyer about it. Nigeria will also play against Lesotho a week later. And it's impossible for me to finish the sport without mentioning that South Africa is in the final of the 2019 Rugby World Cup in Japan. The Springboks got the better of Wales 1916 after a very tense clash in Yokohama on Sunday. But after nerve-wracking 80 minutes, the Rainbow Nation was through and is now hoping for a repeat of the 2007 final. They will take on England on Saturday, a team the Boks beat 15-6 12 years ago. That's all for the sports today, Sophie. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you, Pierre-Antoine. Thank you. Now, let's take you up a mountain in Ethiopia to meet people who live at the top in the village of Shonke. They are descendants of those who founded the settlement 900 years ago. About 20 generations have lived in the village in the Amhara region, but residents now say half have moved out to farmlands down the hill. Well, the local Islamic cleric showed us around the ancient village.
You are now in Shonke village. This village, as we learned from our ancestors, it dates back 900 years according to the Muslim calendar. We can count more than 20 generations who have lived here. The word Argoba means the Arab came in. When Prophet Muhammad started Islam, there were clashes. So they picked some of those under attack and sent them to Ethiopia. Just like cities these days have security, they had guards at the two entry points. There is no better place with this quality and originality of Quran teaching. The teaching here is the old way of Islam. There used to be close to 500 households. Now there are some 250 households remaining. This is our ancestors' village. That is why we cherish it. And it's difficult for us to go to other places. We prefer our homes which are built with local stone. We don't fancy those shining cities. This is where we love to live. My wish is this ancient place to be kept for future generations.
Isn't it fantastic? I like it. Let's take a quick look again at our top story on Focus on Africa. Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch have released reports on what they call the dire state of the media in Tanzania. They say new laws passed since President John Magufuli came into power in 2015 have clamped down on opposition parties, the media, and aid groups. That's Focus on Africa for now. Thanks for your company.